So all the buzz today obviously has been about the Bribery Act in the UK, and I'm curious, I want to hear from everyone, but Mark in particular, what do you think the impact is going to be of that act? I mean, can you talk about the guidance and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we could talk for a whole hour about the Bribery Act and its impact. I think a couple of highlights. I think the UK Bribery Act is only going to fuel greater enforcement both in the US and in the UK. I think that's inevitable. I think it's going to continue to fuel a focus on anti-corruption compliance in multinational organizations. I think notwithstanding the Ministry of Justice guidance, which came out yesterday, especially the sort of short version practical guide for small and medium-sized enterprises, which really takes a very soft touch. I think notwithstanding that, you're going to see the Serious Fraud Office devote their resources to bringing prosecutions in this area. I don't think the SFO is necessarily going to accept at face value some of the more interesting items that appeared in the guidance. For example, what's going to constitute carrying on business in part in the UK? Will a London Stock Exchange listing, for example, or having a UK subsidiary be sufficient? The guidance suggests not necessarily, but ultimately courts will decide. The SFO takes a slightly different tact, which is to say, don't count on that basically if you're a company from a compliance perspective. So I think that's what we're going to see coming out of the Bribery Act.
Isn't it interesting? They say, the guidance is, I hate air quotes, by the way, but I have to say guidance because in a lot of ways it's fairly muddled. And I think, some examples of use common sense, it runs throughout, proportionality runs throughout. But what does that really mean? And when you think about things like the jurisdiction, the act is by its nature extraterritorial. And the guidance says this will not necessarily mean that. But it doesn't say, well, it won't necessarily, but well, maybe it will. And what I think is that, for international companies operating in many different jurisdictions, one of the issues is inconsistencies among these various laws. And it's one thing to say, you're operating, your headquarters is here and you're operating in this other country, so you have the local anti-corruption laws and you have the international anti-corruption laws of your headquarters jurisdiction. But if you then have additional potential prosecutions from around the world, which may only have a tangential relationship with either the business activity or where your corporation is located, it creates a great deal of uncertainty. And frankly, I would have liked to see a little bit more certainty about the jurisdictional issues out of the guidance.
I also think that as Mark indicated, you're going to see some knock-on effects related to U.S. prosecutions because, there have been cases in the past that the UK thought they were going to take and then didn't take, and then others stepped in. I think you're going to see that again.
The Bribery Act has been described by some as being the FCPA on steroids, which I always kind of viewed as a very curious statement to begin with because it had the Section 7 compliance defense in the first place. Now that we have this guidance out there, I think it's very fair to say, and most people would agree, that this is FCPA light. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is not the issue, but this has been very much an overhyped law. You had the Ministry of Justice literally saying in its press release, hey folks, you don't need to go run out and hire lawyers and accountants here. I thought that was the most notable statement from yesterday. A very odd statement for government officials to make. Now, for years, the UK has rightly so, I think, been viewed as the follower here to the United States. But what the UK did this week, provide extensive guidance, is something the DOJ has never done. They were instructed by Congress in 1988 to provide guidance. 23 years later, we're still waiting for that. So this notion that, in terms of a guidance standpoint, the UK is now the leader and we're the follower.
Yeah, I beg to differ. I mean, as Fred suggested, this is guidance only in the loosest sense of the word.
Yeah.
It's internally inconsistent. It's arguably inconsistent with the statute as written on its face and as adopted by Parliament. And I think one of the unfortunate things is that it's not sufficiently clear as to be helpful to businesses.
I don't
that's the problem.
I don't disagree with that,
So-
that one can quibble about the guidance, but they put out guidance.
You're
If
saying
the
at least they tried.
If the expectation level from the business community was that this guidance was going to answer every single question, that was unrealistic expectation in the first place, I think.